in the work that you've been doing, trying to use the myths and the stories that Africans for the longest time, for generations, have used to understand our circumstances. How has that been perceived? Because it seems as though other mythologies from like the West are easily adopted into modern psychology. But do you find that there's maybe a colonial resistance to some of the work that and the approach that you're taking?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I I I wouldn't say that there is a resistance in front of the word that I am doing, because there is more and more work on decolonization. There are collections of books. There is a real demand in terms of knowledge, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
decolonization. There is colloquium. I mean, it's a real topic it has been in the last 10 years. And it's really something that's dominating all the sphere of education at the moment. What I think is that there is more perspective and work to be done in methodology. Methodology for many things, because theorization comes from methodology, and the way we theorize has something to do with the way we observe, with where we put ourselves in terms of research. For example, when we think about topics like Oedipus, Oedipian or Oedipus, I'm not sure the word in English because I've said it many times and I've
Oedipus.
never been sure if it's Oedipus or Oedipus complex. So Freud, he took this example and he built it, and he developed his theory with what he had. And Freud was a psychoanalyst who never worked with children. He never worked with children.
Mm.
He was seeing adult patients. But he only was connected to that child, Hans, whom was the source of this Oedipus complex, through his father. So he was speaking with his father, and his father was speaking with his child, and he was reporting to Freud, and Freud made a theory out of it. So everything in the theory in the Freudian psychoanalysis is something that he designed thinking about children but not speaking with them. And he was seeing adult patients and he was speaking with them and guessing how it was for them when they were children. So in terms of methodology, it's a different perspective than what people do now, because right now in 2024, I mean, if you're a researcher and you're saying, I have a theory about how it works out when we were children, and I've been working with adults, like 20 of them, so I guess that it was like that before. Like, it wouldn't be consistent right now, right? But back then it was. And he made a theory out of it. They explained many things, and many things happened, and psychoanalysis was born. So they had to find a way to make it consistent, and they had to make it consistent. They had to find an explanation in their mythology, and they found something in the Greek mythology that was not theirs, but it was Greek mythology, which is always, I mean, still different than their mythology, but still they used that one. So what I think is that if you take the concept and you say, okay, so Freud said this, and he said it in that specific context. And then I am in Senegal and I'm observing this family, and I want to use that theory to say what they're doing and how they're doing. And if they're not doing like Fred said, then there's a problem with them. I mean, that's not consistent. That's not professional. That's certainly not helpful. So maybe if you want to understand and make science relevant for the people who are using it, for example, the people who are seeking psychological support and coming to you, they want to have something sorted out. They want to be helped with something because they came to psychologists to find a solution to it. Maybe there are other ways to just get all of this frame of understanding and find ways in your head to host the new material. There was a very, very important scientist his name was Claude Lévi-Strauss. He was French. And he said that every culture had a structure. And if you want to understand a culture, you need to get to the structure. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but there has to be a structure. It's like every language, because every language has a structure. There is something that says an action. There is something that says the object that's being connected to the action. There is something else that says who is doing the action. And if you get to understand those three parts, then you can adapt yourself to get to the language and learn a language. So there are no simple languages and complicated languages. There are only people who can learn. So he took this theory and he adapted it to culture. And he said, if you cannot get out of your own culture to understand someone else's culture, it means that you're centralized on your own culture and you cannot have access to someone else's. And he said that there is something to be called cultural relativism, that we have to be able to distantiate ourselves from something we know to get to another point, to host something else that's not ours and understand it and adapt it and get to the structure to get to the problem. So if you're a psychologist and you're working in an environment that's not your culture, you will say, okay, so in this country, this person has this strong dynamic, so he's supposed or she's supposed to be the person taking the decisions. So this person is the person who is impacted by the decisions. So that's maybe the way they're doing. So if you think about mythology, you'll try to find ways to understand how this person was raised, or were they using oral tradition, conveying messages from cultural context? And then you will try to understand those messages and to get to this literature that was told to the person. Because it's always a question of what information is there outside where you are that you can use to understand where you are, how it works. And that's how mythology helps to understand how the field works, how the people are interested, not interested to you or to a situation. So mythology is a body of knowledge that if you want to know a culture or a situation or people, the best way to get closer to their explanation for something that happens is to get closer to their culture, and mythology is the culture.